More. Oh no, I want more. The animalistic voice echoed from the living room. The ones moaning and entwined were my best friend and my husband. Johanna, my close friend since middle school. Her bare, white legs were moving up and down. The heavy breathing of the man, my husband Maurice, told the intensity of their act. I was furious. Maurice and Johanna, doing this in our home. I pointed my smartphone's camera at them and took a step forward. Johanna noticed me and let out a short scream. Maurice, naked, hurriedly tried to cover himself. It was time to end our rotten relationship. I shouted loudly. Don't move! My name is Francis, 30 years old. I work for a specialized trading company in the food industry. I belong to the corporate planning department. As a rising star, I endure tough work every day. Unfortunately, as a workaholic, I had no romantic relationships until I was 28. The person who reached out to me was Darius, a client representative. Darius is Johanna's husband, a gentle and very caring person. I have an interesting friend from my school days. If you're interested, Francis, I could introduce you. He seems to be interested in you too. That was how I was introduced to Maurice. I remember thinking he seemed cheerful, good-looking, and nice. Maurice worked for an advertising agency, appearing as a capable and promising young man. You look even more beautiful than the photo Darius showed me. Looking forward to getting to know you. Nice to meet you. Please call me Francis. You can call me Maurice. Nice to meet you, Maurice. Initially, our relationship went very well. I was smitten with my first boyfriend. Even Johanna, Darius's wife and my close friend since middle school, was surprised by my transformation. Francis, who was so serious, has changed so much. Love is incredible. I'm surprised myself. Maurice and I are going to check out wedding venues soon. Wow! That's the most exciting time. Enjoy every bit of it. Johanna didn't have to tell me twice. I thoroughly enjoyed choosing the venue and the dress. I achieved my goal of getting married by the age of 30. I still dream about that glamorous wedding. It's such a cherished memory. Little did I know that behind those happy days, Maurice was up to such no-good activities. I had no clue, not even an inkling. It was about a year after our wedding, when Maurice suddenly announced he was quitting his job. Needless to say, I was bewildered. Why would he throw away a stable job, and what was he planning next? Did you get an offer from somewhere, or do you already have something lined up? I asked. No, I'm starting a business with my friends. We're launching a startup for app development. He replied. What? This is the first I've heard of it. I exclaimed. Of course it is. I'm telling you now for the first time. So, I have a favor to ask. He asked me to help fund his venture. He wanted me to lend him around $20,000 from my savings, saying that their funds weren't enough. There are many ways to get funding for a startup. They could apply for loans or raise money through crowdfunding. I tried to refuse, but he begged. Please, I'm asking you as a last resort. We're doing everything we can to raise funds, but it's not enough. So, I'm begging you, Francis. But we need to save money too. We might have children someday, and we need to prepare for our old age. I know. I'll pay you back as soon as the business takes off. Please. After countless pleas, I gave in. I lent Maurice $20,000. My hard-earned savings took a significant hit. But supporting my husband's challenges was part of my duty as a wife. I even thought that back then. However, I couldn't understand why he suddenly decided to start a business. Who came up with the idea? Who's in charge? What exactly are they developing? When will they organize the team and what kind of app will they create? I asked Maurice to share more concrete details. I should have checked before lending the money, but can you tell me more about the business? There should be a business plan, right? Or even the documents filed with the tax office? No, I don't have those documents. My partner is managing everything alone. Then talk to him. I'm an investor now, right? I have the right to know about the business, don't you think? Yeah, you're right. I'll get the documents next time. But next time never seemed to come. No matter how long I waited, I didn't get any documents. Every time I asked, it was always, wait a bit longer. When I started pushing harder, Maurice got angry. We have our reasons. I can't just hand out confidential information that easily. Just trust me and wait for the results, okay? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. I was genuinely scared when Maurice, my older husband, yelled at me. In the end, I never got to see those documents. Maurice realized that raising his voice could silence me. After that, he started treating me with increasing contempt. He would call me "Hey you" at home and shout whenever something displeased him. His spending also became reckless. Sometimes, he would demand money, claiming he needed it for business discussions with his partners. Why do you need pocket money just to discuss business? I asked. There are things we can only talk about over drinks. Or do you want me to be the only one in the group without any money? Are you okay with your husband being humiliated outside? Maurice snapped. You don't need to get so angry. I replied. Our business is sure to succeed. I'll repay you 3 or 4 times over when it does. So hurry up and give me the money. I'll be late for our meeting. Maurice urged. Reluctantly, I lent him the money. I kept a record of every amount I lent him. That was the only resistance I could muster at the time. The once smooth sailing of our married life was beginning to show cracks. One afternoon on a weekend, I called Johanna to a coffee shop to update her on my situation. When I told her that he had quit his job to start a business, she widened her eyes. Maurice is ambitious. I'm impressed. Johanna said. Easy for you to say. I'm the one struggling. I'm supporting the household by myself. I responded. Come on, don't be so negative. Support him. Your husband can take on new challenges because you're keeping the home stable, right? Besides, isn't his business going to be successful? Johanna encouraged. Maurice insists it's going to succeed, but who knows? I sighed. The conversation shifted to Johanna's complaints. She was dissatisfied with Darius, saying he lacked excitement and charm compared to Maurice. He's too serious, too rigid. There's no fun or appeal in him. He should take on new challenges. So, in comparison, Maurice is quite impressive as a man. Johanna said. Really? I think Darius, with his serious approach to life, is admirable. I countered. Absolutely not. He's a useless man who will never get ahead. Whenever I try to start something new, it's always Darius who stands in my way first. It's really frustrating. Johanna grumbled. Both of her parents were school teachers, and she had grown up as a model student in a very disciplined household. However, after leaving home, she seemed to have rebelled against that upbringing. Nowadays, she was wild and unrestrained, quite the opposite of her school days. Recently, she had quit her job at an architectural firm to attend a vocational school. She had always been interested in beauty-related work and was now pursuing qualifications in that field. Johanna's defense of Maurice might have been because he was a fellow challenger, just like her. Maybe because she was attending a beauty school, Johanna's outfits were becoming flashier each time we met. She shouldn't have any income right now. So I couldn't help but feel sorry for Darius. One day, someone was waiting for me after work. It was Darius. Looking deeply troubled. He asked for just 30 minutes of my time, and we went into a coffee shop together. He sighed heavily before starting to speak. "You know Johanna has started attending a beauty school, right?" he asked. "Yes, that's what she said. She mentioned that she would be graduating soon," I replied. "It seems she hasn't been attending classes at all," he revealed. "What? Then where has she been, and what has she been doing?" I exclaimed. Darius sighed again. Apparently, Johanna had been skipping school and spending her time elsewhere. He had even hired an investigation firm to find out what she was up to. Using an investigation firm? Darius must have been really troubled. I thought about what Johanna might be doing instead of going to school. I didn't want to think about it, but I couldn't help it. So, I hired an investigation firm, and they found out. Darius trailed off, placing a photo face down in front of me. "Take a look," he said. I hesitantly picked up the photo and turned it over. I was stunned by what I saw. The image, taken by the investigation firm, left me speechless. His words seemed to fade into the background. At that moment, I had no idea what to do next. Perhaps it was the combination of a busy season and the mental strain. But one day I unexpectedly fell ill. I felt feverish and had a headache. I couldn't focus on my work at all. No matter what I was doing, that issue kept haunting my thoughts. What should I do from now on? I sighed again, for what felt like the 100th time. Seeing my condition, my boss kindly suggested that I leave early. I was grateful to have such a considerate boss. Taking their advice, I decided to go home. The source of my current distress was none other than my husband, Maurice. As his wife, I needed to talk to him about this. My earnest nature told me it was the right thing to do. However, a part of me was so furious that I didn't care about anything else. I wanted to catch them, pin them down, and shout until I got the full truth. Both feelings were genuine. If I chose the latter, our marriage would surely be ruined. Should I handle this peacefully, or? I was pondering this as I reached my apartment. As I touched the front door, a faint sense of unease washed over me, making me freeze in place. I could hear faint voices. Voices not meant to be heard at this time of day. Someone was with someone else. I slowly turned the key and quietly opened the door. Just as I suspected. The voices were coming from my and Morris's room. Seemingly from the living room. I carefully tiptoed my way there, ensuring not to make a sound. The living room door was wide open. "More! Oh no, I want more!" Embracing each other in delight was Johanna. Her bare white legs moving up and down like an animal. Her partner was Maurice. Thrusting fervently with heavy breaths. Watching them filled me with intense rage. After typing a short message, I pointed my phone's camera at them. Johanna noticed me and let out a short scream. Maurice frantically scrambled to get up. "Don't move! Francis! Why are you? We're on a video call." "Johanna, want to say something?" "What? Oh, Darius." Johanna turned pale. Of course, she did. My phone screen showed the face of her husband, Darius. I had just sent him a signal and abruptly started a video call. Seeing his wife's betrayal so suddenly, Darius was understandably shocked. Johanna, weren't you supposed to be at school at this time? Well, it's not like that. I mean, what do you mean, it's not like that? Maurice, don't you have anything to say? I'm sorry. I don't even know what to say. Both of them were at a loss for words. Given the circumstances, it was only natural. I first ordered the two of them to get dressed. It was too unsightly for them to remain naked. I also hated the smell lingering in the room, so I opened all the doors and windows wide. Maurice and Johanna stood in the living room, looking desolate. With my smartphone showing Darius, I glared at them. I left work early because I had a headache, Maurice. Why are you home in the middle of the day? What happened to the app development business you were supposed to start? Did it fail? No, it's not that. I just took a break today. Maurice, can you return the $20,000 I lent you by tomorrow? I can't trust you anymore. I can't let you handle my money. You understand what I'm saying, right? Tomorrow. That's impossible. I can't just. Despite the business seemingly not even starting, Maurice was struggling to come up with a reason for why he couldn't repay me. His excuses were pathetic. I then turned my accusatory gaze to Johanna, who was looking down beside him. Johanna, what about you? Darius asked you earlier, didn't he? What about school? Did you leave early like I did? If so, for what reason? If necessary, I'll confirm with the school. Wait. I just didn't feel like going today. Feel like it? You decide whether or not to go to school based on your feelings. I'm the one paying your expensive tuition fees. Do you think you can just do as you please? They both made excuses, thinking we didn't know anything. I was tired. I felt like a fool for even considering forgiving them. I didn't want to hear any more lies or deceptions. I decided to resolve everything right there. A few tens of minutes later, Darius arrived at our place. As Johanna approached him, apologizing, he held up his hand to stop her and ordered her to stand back. Stay back. Maurice, Johanna, I have a lot to say to both of you. Darius's voice was cold. His anger was palpable. The quiet ones are always the scariest when they're angry. Maurice and Johanna must have sensed this too, as tension filled the air between them. Maurice, so you borrowed money not just from Francis, but from me as well? What? Maurice, you borrowed from Darius too? How many people did you scam money from? What's the total amount? Can you pay it back? I will pay it back. Of course, I will. It's just that I don't have the means right now. Maurice claimed the business was still in its early stages, with no profits yet, so he couldn't repay the money. He promised to pay it back little by little over time. But Darius shook his head. No. I want it back by tomorrow. If you refuse, show me your business plan. No, I can't. There's a confidentiality agreement. Here we go again. You said something similar when you borrowed the money, didn't you? That you couldn't provide details but assured me it would be profitable. I trusted you and lent you the money. I'm sorry, but I can't pay it back immediately. Darius let out a big sigh, glaring sharply at Johanna. She straightened up under his gaze. Darius stared at his unfaithful wife for a while. Johanna, you will repay me the tuition fees. All of it. What? But you said it was an investment in me, Darius. It was meant to be an investment, but look at what you've done. Skipping school because you don't feel like it, and sleeping with another man in the middle of the day? It's absolutely unacceptable. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. Johanna looked down, seemingly remorseful. But he didn't let up. He seemed determined to vent everything he'd been holding in. Your apologies mean nothing. Johanna, I'll also reclaim all the money you wasted using the family card. You will repay every cent you spent. Got it? What? That's impossible. I'm not working. Then quit school and start working immediately. I'm not spending another dollar on you. You betrayed me. What you did is unforgivable. No matter how many times she apologized, it was futile. Darius's anger only intensified. The betrayal by his wife and friend had clearly hit him hard. Tears welled up in Johanna's eyes as she felt the rejection. She began to cry out like a child. It's not fair. It's your fault for not paying any attention to me, Darius. That's why I did this. Can't you understand that? You should be the one reflecting. So, you're blaming me? You're saying I was too focused on work and didn't give you enough attention? And that justifies your cheating? Do you really think you're blameless? Stop joking. You say I was also at fault, but you had your share of issues too. Apologize. We can talk after that. What a brazen woman. Enough. It's divorce time. Sign this now. What impeccable preparation. He had come prepared with divorce papers. With a furious expression, Johanna signed them. Now acting out of sheer stubbornness, spitting insults. Fine. I'm done with a useless, overly serious guy like you. You won't ever get promoted. Maurice is way more ambitious and impressive. That's true. I'm not the type to climb the corporate ladder. I admit it. I might remain a regular employee forever. But guess what? I'm about to become the CEO. Huh? What do you mean by that? CEO. You, Darius. Both Johanna and Maurice stood there with their mouths agape, utterly stunned. Anyone would be shocked by such a revelation. But I already knew. Darius had told me beforehand that his maternal uncle was passing his company on to him. My uncle asked me to take over his company. Are you serious? Is that true? Why would I lie about something like this? The business aligns with my current job, so I'm very motivated. From next spring, I'll be running a company with an annual revenue of $20 million. Johanna turned pale at the mention of that figure. She suddenly realized her mistake. Quickly, she tried to cling to Darius. Groveling at his feet, a truly pathetic sight. Wait! Forget about the divorce. It's unfair to spring this on me now. Unfair? You said you had no interest in a dull, overly serious guy like me, right? Why don't you go be with your ambitious, promising Maurice? Isn't that what you wanted? No, it's not true. I was wrong. Please, don't leave me. I'll do anything. The mention of $20 million had clearly struck a chord. Johanna abandoned all pride, desperately trying to cling to Darius. It was evident that Darius had anticipated this reaction, which is why he had Johanna sign the divorce papers first. Now it was my turn. I pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared from my bag and handed them to Maurice. Now it's your turn. Sign this right now. Francis, do you have any surprises hidden like Darius? No, nothing. But even if I did, what difference would it make? I can't trust you anymore. I just want a divorce. That's all there is to it. Give me another chance. Please. I swear I'll never cheat again. There was no way I could agree to that. Starting over was out of the question. Did he really think I was oblivious to everything? I had known about their relationship for months and had agonized over what to do. Let me tell you, both Darius and I have known about your affair for months, I said. What? Really? Maurice stammered. Darius, is that true? And you acted normally all this time? Johanna asked. Yes, it's true. It was tough, but this wasn't just my problem. I consulted with Francis, and we discussed what to do next. And then this happened. Darius explained. It was time to resolve this mess. Divorce would be the solution. Today, right here, 2 marriages would end. Maurice and Johanna both protested, shouting no, but it was useless. If it comes to this, we might as well lay everything on the table. Maurice, we know your business plan is a complete lie, I said. There was never any plan to start an app development company, was there? You used the money you got from lying to us for online casinos. We've got evidence, Darius added. What? That's not. Maurice started to say. What? What do you mean? Maurice, weren't you supposed to become a CEO? Johanna interjected, clearly shocked. It seemed Johanna had been deceived by him as well. There was no prospect of the business succeeding or any money coming back, because the business plan itself was a fabrication. When I found out, I was devastated. I felt foolish for believing him, and it affected my work. Darius must have felt the same. Darius's gaze toward Maurice was icy cold. Liar. Betrayer. Useless. I believed you would become rich soon, that's why I. You idiot. Why do you think I slept with you? Johanna yelled. How should I know? It's your own fault for believing it, Maurice retorted. Maurice, are you seriously saying that? That it's our fault for believing you? I questioned. What a piece of work. You're beyond saving. Admitting to your lies doesn't change anything, Darius remarked. He was right. Admitting to his lies here only worsened his position. Even Maurice seemed to realize that. Maurice straightened up and bowed his head. I am truly sorry for all the lies. From now on, I will change my ways and work earnestly. I will repay all the money I borrowed. Please, just don't divorce me. Me too. I'll change as well. Please, don't leave me, Johanna pleaded. Their naivety was astounding. They thought an apology would suffice to earn forgiveness. Maurice and Johanna didn't understand the extent of our anger. Darius and I exchanged glances and sighed. In exasperation. There's no chance of mending this relationship. And just so you know, there are hidden cameras in this apartment. Everything you two did is recorded. What? When did you set that up? Maurice exclaimed. Just recently. I wanted to keep track of where you were and what you were doing. I was also curious about what was happening in this apartment while I was away during the day. Francis, please send me the footage later. I need to secure the evidence, Darius said. Of course. If this went to court, the evidence would make winning easy. No matter how much Maurice and Johanna resisted, they were powerless against the recorded proof. However, the two of them seemed already resigned to their fate, having lost the will to resist. I turned to him and once again urged him to sign the divorce papers. Now, just sign the divorce papers and accept reality. If you say anything unnecessary, I will send the footage to your father-in-law and mother-in-law. No! Please don't! That would be disastrous. Yes, it certainly would be. Your father-in-law and mother-in-law would be deeply shocked to learn how you betrayed me. Maurice was their only child, born late in their lives. His elderly parents, now in their mid-70s, lived together in a care facility. Showing them footage of their son's betrayal would be a huge shock. The anger could cause a burst blood vessel or a fall resulting in a serious head injury. Using his parents as leverage was distasteful, but it was effective against him. He signed the divorce papers as I instructed. Well, I think it's time for me to leave. I have things to take care of at home, Darius said. I'll help. I'll do anything. Even if it's just as a housekeeper, please let me stay, Johanna begged. No, I don't need you. What I am going to do now is throw all of your belongings out of my house. Take what you need. Anything left will be picked up by a removal company and disposed of. Wait. Please, wait. Darius. I'm begging you. Darius and Johanna left. What I needed to do next was similar to Darius. Tidying up the past. I had to clear out everything unnecessary from this room. I'm going to the family court now to submit the divorce papers. Maurice, pack your things and leave. Let me know your new address, and I'll send any remaining belongings cash on delivery. Francis, is it really over for us? Can't we start over? Absolutely not. Honestly, I never want to see your face again. Listen, if you're still here when I get back, I'll send the recorded footage to your father-in-law and mother-in-law. Wait, Francis, please. I truly regret everything I've done. So what? I'm at my limit. Make sure to leave the spare key in the mailbox. If it's not there when I get back, I'll send the footage immediately, so keep that in mind. He bowed his head again. But that wasn't going to earn him forgiveness. At the very least, he should return the money he borrowed. I left the room, half crying, with Maurice still there. After submitting the divorce papers at the family court, I spent a little time at a coffee shop, thinking about my plans. I spent about an hour thinking about my future plans before returning to the apartment. Maurice must have really dreaded the thought of his parents seeing the footage of his betrayal. When I got back, he was already gone. Darius had found out that Maurice had borrowed money from 6 other people besides us. Initially, Maurice genuinely intended to start a business, but after failing, he gave up. Some had invested as much as $50,000. Maurice spared no effort to collect money. Maurice, who had been hiding at a friend's house, was found by men hired by his creditors. Astonishingly, he didn't have any money when he was caught. Despite collecting close to $150,000, he had squandered it all on internet casinos, hoping for a big win. Maurice was placed under the watchful eye of his creditors and forced to keep working until his debts were repaid. He lived a life without freedom until the debt was cleared. According to Darius, who was in contact with the creditors, Maurice had become a mere skeleton. He can't eat properly but has to work hard, so he's so emaciated that you wouldn't recognize him. Well, you brought this on yourself. Indeed. What about Johanna? What happened to her? She was resisting a lot. Yeah, she resisted fiercely. But in the end, she had no choice but to comply with my demands. Johanna is just like Maurice. She's leading a pretty miserable life now. She lost almost all her belongings to Darius. All her branded clothes, shoes, bags, valuables, and daily necessities were taken away. If she had savings, it might have been a different story, but she didn't, so there was no other option. Darius, despite her reluctance, sold her possessions and turned them into cash to recover his money. He also forced her to drop out of the beauty school and took away the family credit cards and everything else. Johanna, thrown out with nothing but the clothes on her back, ended up moving to a rural area. She eventually started working in the nightlife industry, becoming obsessed with nightclubs due to stress, which led her to accumulate massive debts. But that part of her story would unfold a bit later. The divorce drama brought Darius and me closer than ever. His sincerity resonated deeply with me, and we understood each other's emotional wounds well. Initially, we didn't put our feelings into words, but we both sensed what was happening. Eventually, we began dating officially and got remarried 6 months later. Unexpectedly, I found myself in the position of a CEO's wife. Though I love my job and have no intention of quitting, I know that I could leave at any time and our life would still be secure. The emotional scars left by Maurice and Johanna haven't fully healed yet. I might still feel unpleasant when I recall those times. But even in those moments, I have Darius by my side. With him standing beside me, there's nothing to fear. That's how I feel these days. I'm taking the house, the savings, and the retirement fund. You can go live in a home. Understood. These were the last words spoken to me by my husband of 35 years on the final day of our marriage. Rather than cherishing the effort I put into raising our children, caring for our parents, and working tirelessly, he chose to cast me aside in the most humiliating way. What was the meaning of my 35 years of dedication? He left all responsibilities to me while he enjoyed nights out. Never once did he express gratitude, as if my efforts were expected. Looking back, I'm amazed at how long I endured this treatment. But now, it's time for me to live my life in my golden years. I thought it was my husband's turn to be miserable. My name is Grace, I'm 60 years old. Working part-time at a food company's factory. My husband's name is Robert, he's 65. We met through a mutual acquaintance and got married when I was 25, marking 35 years of marriage. Our relationship began with what was then popular group dating, and after several dates, influenced by our friends, we started dating. As we met more and more, we both started to think that if we were to marry anyone, it would be each other. Getting married felt like a natural progression. Starting our life together, I realized Robert had no savings. In the beginning, we lived in a small apartment, with most living expenses covered by me. Robert's low income made me anxious about our future, so I continued working, sometimes unable to manage household chores due to overtime. You're late. I'm hungry already. Did you wait? You could have eaten first. How can I eat when there's nothing to eat? Robert often came home earlier than me, as he rarely worked overtime, yet he never helped with household chores. Isn't it a woman's job to do the housework? We're not in that era anymore. That time was when women were starting to make significant strides in the workforce. The term career woman was becoming common, but Robert insisted that household duties were a woman's job, as if stuck in an outdated mindset. I would have preferred being a housewife if it were financially feasible. Balancing work and home life is what defines the modern woman. Our situation wasn't exactly the stereotype of a henpecked husband, but reflected Robert's tendency to interpret things in a way that suited him. While I was constrained, Robert often went out drinking. If you're going to be late, at least let me know. Quit nagging! It's my time! I can do what I want! His tone grew even harsher when he came home drunk. While I couldn't freely use my own money or time, Robert enjoyed his. I feel like I'm always getting the short end of the stick. Early in our marriage, I was so frustrated that I considered divorce. But when I confided in my mom, she strongly advised against it. I also worried about societal judgment and lacked the courage to leave. Living together meant acknowledging both the good and the bad, I constantly reminded myself. After my husband Robert received his paycheck, he'd either go out for drinks or just enjoy his freedom. He never considered taking on a side job or working overtime. Instead, he'd leave work on time, choosing between heading out for drinks or coming home. When he did come home and found me not there, he'd complain. "I hate coming home to an empty house. Seeing the lights off through the window stresses me out. But sometimes I have to work late." I'd respond, "What's the point of you working overtime? You should find a different job." He'd retort. Robert took it upon himself to call my workplace and suggested they let me go. Whether my boss wanted to avoid getting involved in whatever was happening or had already wanted to fire me, I was encouraged to resign. It became uncomfortable to stay, so I left a job that was hard to get in the first place. Now, I was faced with the daunting task of job hunting again. Having already left 2 companies, my resume wasn't passing the initial screenings. In a panic, "Why not work part-time? I'm working full-time anyway," Robert casually mentioned. I wasn't particularly career-driven, so I didn't cling to my aspirations. However, I was worried if we could manage on Robert's salary alone. So, I took on 2 part-time jobs. One as an early morning cleaner and another as a supermarket cashier. I'd even work overtime at the supermarket on days I knew Robert would be home late. I made sure to be home when Robert was around and worked diligently when he wasn't. I endured years of this routine, convincing myself that Robert needed me. I found his desire to have me home when he returned somewhat endearing at the time. A year into our marriage, I gave birth to our first son. "Our apartment is getting too cramped. Yeah, the kid will want his own room when he's older, and he might even want siblings." Around that time, Robert's mom, Karen, who was a divorced single mother, suggested we live together. Probably, she felt lonely after Robert, her only child, left home. "It's all positives, right? We won't have to pay rent," Robert said, likely echoing Karen's words. I wanted some time to think it over. "Mom's already getting things ready," he pressed, revealing that a room for our son was already being prepared, complete with new wallpaper. I was shocked at how far they had progressed with their plans without me. Wanting to continue working part-time, I agreed, albeit a bit lightly. A decision I would soon regret. Karen seemed to have it out for me, delivering daily doses of sarcasm. "It's sad for the child to see his mom work so much. I can't believe this. It wasn't like this in my time," she'd say. Karen had never worked. After her divorce, she relied on her parents to raise Robert. Karen's family was somewhat wealthy, so there was money. Now, it seems she's living off a small inheritance and a meager pension. Though her spending habits seemed a bit extravagant. Her kindness extended to her hobbies and her son and grandson, but never to me. Meals were prepared without considering me, and I was often left behind on outings. I was thankful she looked after my grandson, though. With Karen taking over the household, Robert told me, "You can work full-time now, overtime included." "What? Why all of a sudden?" I asked, baffled. "Since Mom's here, you can go work," he said. I thought to myself, what a selfish person he is. It was then I realized that when he said he wanted me to stay home, it wasn't because he wanted me there, but rather someone to take care of his needs. I started my mornings by dropping off our child at the childcare center, then heading to work as a temp. Fortunately, Karen was always willing to pick up our grandson, which allowed me to rely on her for the return trips. Being able to work overtime without complaints was a relief. This routine continued for about 10 years until Karen began to act strangely. "Who are you?" "A thief, I guess." "Robert, call the police." "No, it's me, Grace." Karen had developed Alzheimer's disease and saw me as a complete enemy. She increasingly failed to recognize Robert and our son as well. One day, while wandering, she was involved in a traffic accident and became bedridden. "This is your fault. You're responsible for taking care of her," Robert blamed me. "How is it my fault? You shouldn't be working late nights." "But you're the one who said I could work." Our arguments became endless. I considered leaving with our son, but couldn't abandon Karen. Besides, our son loved both Robert and Karen too much for me to separate them. Karen, who never accepted me as family, complained daily while I cared for her. When I confided in Robert, he dismissed it simply. "She has dementia, what can you do?" Eventually, I quit my job and became increasingly isolated. I had hoped Karen might become kinder to me, thinking I was a stranger due to her condition, but that was wishful thinking. She must have inherently disliked me. Yet, she was still an important grandmother to our son. I cared for Karen alone until she passed away. After Karen's death and our son becoming independent, only Robert and I remained. With Robert's retirement coming up next year, I looked forward to traveling together and exploring new places. However, Robert presented me with something shocking. "Mine's already filled out. Just sign and submit it." "A divorce application?" "It's obvious if you look at it. You're really dumb, you know. That's what's been so annoying." I felt as if I'd been punched. It felt like I might collapse right there. "Why? Did I do something to deserve a divorce? If I had to say, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with you." "What do you mean?" Robert looked at me with a scornful smile and dropped a bombshell. "I want to marry someone else." And then, there was Robert's mistress. It seems their affair had been going on for years. The mistress was 20 years younger than me. "Even when I was taking care of Mom and raising our child, you were cheating?" "That's about right." The anger inside me was about to explode. While I endured Karen's harsh words, took care of our child, and suffered loneliness all by myself, Robert was out having fun with his mistress. I wish I never knew this. "You've been deceiving me all along. I'll never forgive you." "And what are you going to do about it?" "Like you could do anything." Robert taunted me with a smirk. "So, you're divorcing me to be with her?" "That's right. She's much younger than you." "Understood. I'll sign the divorce papers. But just so you know, I'll be seeking compensation from both of you." "Fine by me. I'll pay whatever amount. I've got Mom's inheritance, after all." "Oh, but just so you know, I'm not splitting any property with you." I took a moment to think. I had some savings of my own, which I didn't want Robert or his mistress to get their hands on. "Okay, I'll settle for the compensation. In return, we don't split my assets either." Robert burst out laughing at that. "Your money isn't worth much anyway. I don't need it." We signed the documents in the presence of lawyers, agreeing not to pursue a division of property but to settle on a compensation claim. I received $30,000, which seemed to be paid out in a lump sum from Karen's estate. He probably wanted to start his new life with his mistress as quickly as possible, resolving any messy ties with money. After the lawyer left, "I'm taking the house, the savings, and the retirement funds. You can go live in a home," Robert said. And so, I did end up moving into a facility. Not because Robert told me to, but because it seemed like a more enjoyable way to spend my retirement. The house was originally Robert's family home, and I had nowhere else to live. My sister and her husband were living in my family home, and I didn't want to impose on my son and his wife. I knew Robert had no savings, so dividing property would have been pointless. I preferred to get the divorce over with quickly and was confident I could make it on my own from now on. Robert was the heir to Karen's estate, and the compensation was enough for me. Months later, Robert showed up at the facility. Though I hadn't given him my current address. He wasn't supposed to know I had moved into the facility. He must have used some agency to find me. I wondered what he could possibly want after all this time. There were other residents at the facility. So I asked him to wait on the outdoor terrace. Seeing Robert sitting there, looking around, I felt a sense of pity. What had I ever seen in this man to marry him? It was a mystery even to myself. Sorry to keep you waiting. What do you want? What's all this about? Robert confronted me without a greeting, clearly shocked. I played dumb, knowing full well why he was surprised. Why are you here all of a sudden? How did you find me? It took me forever to track you down since you wouldn't contact me. You didn't tell our son either, did you? He had no idea. I didn't want to bother him, as he has his own family now. But that doesn't answer my question. How did you find out about this place? I hired a detective. When I mentioned I needed to contact you about the compensation, they found you. Having an ex-husband is quite handy. So, he had gone through an agency after all. Which detective agency was it? I was furious at the breach of privacy but kept my cool. More importantly, how can someone like you afford to stay in such a luxurious facility? That was what Robert was astonished about. After our divorce, I had moved into a high-end facility that we had once considered for our retirement. It wasn't your typical nursing home, but more of a luxury apartment complex with an attached hospital. There was also a dining hall run by a nutritionist, and I spent my days enjoying the company of other residents and helpers. You could be on your own if you wished, and someone would check on each room daily to ensure no one had fallen. Each room was equipped with an emergency call button for immediate assistance. I heard this place costs $1 million? How do you have that kind of money? Actually, I've been investing for the past 35 years, ever since we got married. I wanted to ensure we could enjoy our retirement together. I had been laid off during a recession and struggled to find a new job, which drained my savings and filled me with anxiety. Understanding the unpredictability of life, I realized that saving money wasn't enough and started learning about investments. I didn't want to seem greedy, so I never told Robert, whom I was dating at the time. I began investing modestly. After we got married, my desire for us to enjoy good food and travel in our retirement grew stronger, prompting me to invest more seriously. Since we both worked, I gradually invested my earnings, sacrificing outings with friends, delicious meals, shopping, and vacations, putting all my disposable income into investments. After 35 years of consistent investing, I amassed a significant fortune, partly because I started right when the economy was down. When I shared this, Robert claimed, "Then that money is mine too." I had anticipated he would say something like that. "Sorry, but you have no claim to my money." "Why not? I'm your ex-husband. It should be part of my assets too." "You renounced any claim to my assets in front of our lawyers. Have you forgotten already?" "Damn, that's why you insisted on a lawyer. You tricked me." "Who's been deceiving whom all along?" Robert's face twisted in frustration. Realizing this conversation was a waste of time, I urged him to leave. "No way. I'm not leaving. I'll live here too." I was speechless with disbelief. Shortly after, a security guard arrived, prompted by another resident who noticed my distress and escorted Robert out. Due to his harassing behavior, Robert was banned from the facility and added to the blacklist. Curious about his persistence, I contacted our son, who revealed that Robert was in debt. After our divorce, Robert planned to marry his mistress. However, she became furious upon learning about the compensation he paid me. To appease her, Robert lavished her with gifts. But she eventually left him for a younger man without marrying him. "Are you dumping me after all I've spent on you?" It was too late for regrets. The mistress had moved on, losing interest in a now penniless Robert. It turns out she was using Robert as a convenient source of money, likely having always preferred the younger man. I couldn't believe a woman 20 years younger would seriously consider marrying someone like Robert. It seems he was the only one who truly believed in his affair turning into marriage, which must have been a huge shock to him. After donating all of his inheritance to his mistress and accumulating debt, Robert ended up alone in a house that was over 70 years old. The house was in bad shape, with many parts broken and no money for repairs. He now lives alone in a leaky home. My son expressed no interest in helping him. Recently, a community worker visited, asking Robert to at least repair the exterior walls because it was affecting the neighboring house. Robert's angry outburst over this request led to a police incident. My son had to pick up his father from the police station, where he told Robert they were through. "You're abandoning me too?" Robert cried, clinging to his son, who shook him off. Discarded by his son, I thought how pitiful Robert was. After the incident with the police, he became a pariah in the neighborhood, spending his weekends indoors. After telling me about Robert's current situation, my son asked me to keep in touch occasionally. I was touched that he cared. Sometime after talking to my son, I received a call from Robert. Ignoring it, he then called the facility directly. Such persistence. The staff were worried for me. I decided to answer just once. "I just need a little money." "I refuse." "Don't you have a pension?" Robert was supposed to have recently retired, so his claim of having no money seemed like a lie. "I didn't get anything." "Don't lie. You received a pension, didn't you?" "I got fired just before retirement because of the affair." Turns out, Robert was fired just short of retirement. Apparently, his mistress was a co-worker. After breaking up, Robert's stalking scared her into reporting him to their employer. Ultimately, his affair was exposed, leading to his dismissal without a pension. His stalking and the resulting police involvement also became a problem. I felt no sympathy for his story. I asked the facility staff to call the police if he contacted again. When Robert realized he couldn't reach me by phone, he resorted to sending letters. The letter began with, "I want to see you again. I'm lonely." But towards the end, "I need some money." The content changed to things like that. "I think he's struggling." There was a time I inadvertently laughed. I forgot which letter it was, but the ink was slightly smeared. It looked like it was from tears, but I suspect it was just water. I wondered what the point of such a performance was. Truly, it must be hard for him. The letters stopped after about a year when I didn't respond. Years passed, and I had completely forgotten about Robert. Then one day, while I was shopping, a man in dirty clothes, emitting a slight odor, approached me. It was undoubtedly Robert, now thin with almost entirely white hair and a bushy beard. "Isn't that Grace?" I was shocked by how much he had changed. "I've finally found you. Let's start over. You're all I have." Feeling frightened as Robert grabbed my hand, he insisted. "It's me, Robert. You recognize me, right?" "I do, but we are strangers now. Goodbye." As I tried to leave, Robert blocked my path, looking at me with desperate eyes. Then suddenly begged, "Please, come back home. I don't want to be alone in my old age. You were the one who drove me away. Have you forgotten?" "I'm apologizing, aren't I?" "Sorry isn't enough. I've moved on. You should too." Despite my attempts to ignore him, Robert kept chasing me, repeatedly bowing his head. "We're divorced, Robert. Stop this." I was wrong. You're the most important thing to me. I've realized that now. It's too late. As I tried to distance myself, Robert grabbed my arm. Then, could you let go of her, please? Who are you? This is my husband. What? I had remarried. My new husband's name is Matthew. 2 years my senior. We got close in the same facility where we met. It was Matthew who had called security when Robert visited. This was shared with me by another resident, and I was drawn to their considerate and kind nature. We naturally spent more time together and decided to marry. Despite wondering if it was odd to remarry at our age, we chose happiness for our final chapter. Matthew pulled Robert away from me. You remarried? Yes. So please leave me alone. So that's how it is. Robert was visibly shaken. I was worried he might lash out at Matthew in anger, but he had no energy left. Instead, he collapsed, crying on the spot. Please stop. It's embarrassing. Shut up. Don't bother me. Robert cried unabashedly, as onlookers watched from afar. I thought it was a pitiful sight. A grown man, crouched down on the street, crying. Is this something a person can do without shame? Or perhaps, am I being tested? Grace, let's go. Yes. Encouraged by Matthew, I left the scene behind. Since then, Robert has not appeared before me again. According to my son, Robert still lives in the same old, unrepaired house. Unable to properly take care of household chores and accumulating garbage to the point of generating complaints for the smell. My son has been inconvenienced by repeated contacts every time there's a complaint. Despite attempts to reason with him, my son finally lost his patience. In front of a city official, "He's not my son," Robert declared. Following that, attempts to contact my son ceased when Robert reacted angrily to them. It seems the authorities have also given up, deeming any effort futile. Truly, Robert has become a neighborhood nuisance. However, that's no longer my concern. Ultimately, abandoned by everyone, Robert lives in isolation. If only I hadn't started that affair. My son mentioned hearing Robert say. But to me, it's not about the affair. It's the price of living selfishly, without regard for others, now coming back to haunt him. It's his responsibility. Humans may be prone to making regrettable decisions, but continuing without reflection for over 70 years is merely pitiful. Robert will likely never realize this, having destroyed his own future. The task of repairing it falls to him, though he may lack the strength to do so. I hope he faces his actions and lives on. I'm thankful to Robert. Had I continued to rely on him, my later years would have been disastrous. His decision to divorce because of his affair allowed me to live my life. I've started to communicate more frequently with my son. It was a turning point when Emily, my son's wife, who mediated between us, said, "Please don't worry about it." That moment made me realize how much of my life was spent overly accommodating others. I had distanced myself from my adult son to avoid burdening him. Shocked when he expressed his dislike for his grandmother and father from childhood. Aware of the mistreatment and infidelity, I've resolved to live the rest of my life without such undue consideration. Now, my son's family and grandchildren visit, allowing us to make up for lost time in conversation. My son seems a bit shy, but it's strange how he can talk naturally when his wife and grandchildren are around. He has accepted Matthew, and to my grandchildren, Matthew is like a real grandfather. Currently, Matthew and I enjoy our time in the facility, surrounded by friends and content. My priority is health, hoping for a long life. Don't talk to me, I'm tired. Christopher coldly averted his eyes, pushed my shoulder as I stood in front of him, and walked away to the changing room. Wait. I tried to call out, but no voice came out. As Christopher's indifferent back disappeared, I felt dizzy and involuntarily knelt down. I can't believe this. He didn't even change a single expression on his face. I've been putting up with him for so long now. Maybe it's partly my fault. Maybe Christopher is just busy with work, I tried to convince myself, looking for reasons to justify his behavior. I believed that if I changed, Christopher would return to his old self. I thought I had done everything possible for that. But still, Christopher didn't change. That's why I resorted to the last option. I had resolved that this would truly be the end. I decided to get a divorce once and for all. It was then that I noticed a new message on Christopher's mobile phone on the table. I was shocked when I saw it without thinking. What the? Seeing that, I vowed to myself. I had no choice but to brace myself. I'm going to show that man. I am Zoe, 26 years old. I recently married Christopher after dating him for about 3 years and moved out of my home. It's odd to say it myself, but being the youngest, I was doted on. So, on the day I left, my whole family cried. Be happy, Zoe. Christopher, please take care of Zoe. Of course, sir. Despite Dad's statement that seemed to pressure, Christopher answered with a relaxed smile. I'm really counting on you. There are 2 reasons why Dad emphasized this so much. The first reason is that Christopher has a history of divorce. Moreover, he ended his first marriage in just 6 months. The reason for the divorce was supposedly due to personality differences, but the brevity of the marriage was concerning. Dad had consented to the marriage, but had always been worried about that. I understand your feelings all too well as a man. So, today, I thought I'd make a clear statement. Christopher declared loudly and pulled out something he had brought. It was, astonishingly, a filled-out divorce application form. Though it may seem an aberrant act by common standards, Christopher said earnestly and handed something to Dad. If I can't make Zoe happy, please submit this. Continuing, Christopher added to the bewildered Dad. I apologize for causing worry to you all because of my divorce history. So, this is like an insurance. I won't need to use this. I'm determined to make her happy. Please accept it. Dad was perplexed, but took Christopher's earnestness to heart. He silently nodded and accepted it. This was the second reason for Dad's worry. Christopher was quite the charmer and an eccentric man. Understood. I'll trust you. Dad nodded with a complicated expression. Our married life began like this. Not to say it was a dream come true, but I was looking forward to our marriage. However, what awaited me, full of anticipation, was an unexpected hell. After quitting my job and becoming a housewife, I woke up earlier than Christopher every day, prepared everything, and saw him off with a smile. Have a good day. Do your best. Before we were married, Christopher would respond with a hug and a kiss. I'm off. I'll do my best for you. He would always sew and leave the house, waving his hand. But after marriage, Christopher changed. Yeah. With just that single word, Christopher would leave the house. His aloofness was so surprising that at first, I wondered if he was feeling unwell. Furthermore, when he returned home, Christopher was strange. Welcome home. Would you like dinner? Or would you like to take a bath? I greeted him with the usual line. To that, Christopher languidly replied, Bath. Just bath? Is something wrong? Confused, I couldn't help but ask, but Christopher just looked at me coldly for a moment and replied, Nothing. Thinking back, maybe getting any response was better than nothing. Now, a week into our marriage, Christopher has stopped responding altogether. When he's in a good mood, he might still react with a word or a gesture, but the problem is when he is in a bad mood. When Christopher is in a bad mood, he completely ignores me. Hey, don't ignore me. You've been like this ever since we got married. Did I do something wrong? Christopher didn't reply. Please say something. When I started to feel down and tears were about to fall, Christopher sighed heavily upon seeing this. You think crying solves everything, don't you? Must be nice being a woman, it's so easy. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't stop the tears. I silently looked down. The only thing I could do was hide my tears. Actually, my dad runs a company. I am what you would call a president's daughter. Before getting married, I worked as an office clerk at my dad's company. That's where I met Christopher. I, an office clerk, often handled the sales slips of Christopher, who was in sales. We gradually became close, and he asked me out. He seemed very surprised to learn I was the president's daughter, but that made me happy. He saw me not as the president's daughter, but for who I am personally. Back then, Christopher who would earnestly listen to my stories and respond with a smile. But that Christopher is long gone now. I wish I hadn't married him. Is there some reason for this? Did I do something wrong? I thought about it, but couldn't find any reason. The only thing that seemed to have caused Christopher to change so drastically was the marriage itself. Getting married, some people change due to relaxation or familiarity. I think that happens to some extent. But in Christopher's case, it was more than just to some extent. If I had known he was like this before marriage, I would never have married him. I took out a sheet of paper from a file I had kept in my desk. It was the divorce application form that Christopher had given me that day. If I submit this to the city hall, would the old Christopher come back? I spent days looking at the divorce application form and then putting it back. One day, when I returned from shopping, Christopher was standing in the doorway with a scary look on his face, waiting for me. It was the middle of a weekday. Why was he at home? Wondering, I tried to smile and spoke. Welcome home. Christopher slammed the table. Startled by the noise, I stumbled and fell. Christopher took a few steps closer, looked down at me coldly, and showed me the paper he was holding. Do you know what this is? In fear, I nodded. What Christopher held was the filled-out divorce application form. It was supposed to be always in the drawer, but why? Then I realized. Maybe I had looked at it before shopping, as usual, and forgot to put it back. Do you want to divorce me? Well, I couldn't say it wasn't true. Life with Christopher recently has been mentally exhausting. If this kind of life continues, I am considering divorce. It's because you've been strange since we got married. Lately, you ignore everything I say, and I can't call this happiness. So it's my fault. Then he stared at the divorce application form. I'm fine with divorcing. What? But remember, in this case, Zoe, you're the one at fault. The problem lies with you, failing to support your husband as a wife. Christopher waved the divorce application form. But Christopher, you said to Dad. He promised he would make me happy. Before I could finish, Christopher seemed to realize something and snorted. Promise to make you happy, huh? A typical princess way of thinking. How could you? You and your family are too naive. Clearly, our worlds are too different. It might be good for you to experience poverty for once. I didn't understand what Christopher meant, but from that day on, he stopped giving me any living expenses. Moreover, he even took away my credit card and debit cards. Originally, I quit my job because Christopher wanted me to. I want you to greet me cheerfully when I come home, Christopher said, and I became a housewife to fulfill his request. Now, as a housewife, I have no income. It seems Christopher was paying for the rent and utility bills, but the biggest problem was food. The food at home is almost gone. Please, I need living expenses. Although it was humiliating, I begged Christopher. Christopher seemed pleased and said something outrageous. Don't worry. I'll eat out. What? Wait a minute. No matter how much I pleaded, he completely ignored me, and I ended up not getting any living expenses. Christopher continued to come home late night after night. I managed to survive on the remaining food and instant meals, but I had reached my limit. On a rare day when Christopher came home on time, I finally voiced the thoughts that had been haunting me. You don't give me any money, and you don't talk to me. This isn't happiness. This isn't even a marriage. If this life continues, if you don't intend to change, please, let's get a divorce. I hoped that this might make Christopher change, even a little. If he didn't change at all, then I would give up. It was my last resort. I waited anxiously for Christopher's response. Christopher looked down and scratched his head, then spoke in a low voice. Don't talk to me, I'm tired. Christopher coldly averted his eyes, pushed my shoulder as I stood in front of him, and walked away to the changing room. Wait. I tried to call out, but no sound came out. As Christopher's indifferent back disappeared, I felt dizzy and involuntarily knelt down. I can't believe this. He didn't even change a single expression on his face. I had endured so much. Christopher had changed his attitude completely after marriage, and I wondered if it was partly my fault. Maybe it's because he's busy with work. I tried to convince myself, looking for reasons to justify his behavior. I believed that if I changed, Christopher would return to his old self. I thought I had done everything possible for that. But still, Christopher didn't change. That's why I had to take the final step. I had resolved that this would truly be the end. There was no sign of disturbance on Christopher's face. Normally, wouldn't someone panic a little if their spouse they loved asked for a divorce? Instead, Christopher looked terribly bothered. Seeing that face made it clear. Christopher no longer loved me. Let's get a divorce, once and for all. There's no point in continuing this marriage. I'm hungry, and I might as well pack my bags right now. I slowly stood up and headed towards the drawer where the divorce application form was kept. Then, I noticed the screen of Christopher's mobile phone on the table lighting up. It seemed like a message had arrived. I intended just to glance at it, but what I saw shocked me. What the? Displayed on the mobile phone was a screen full of heart emojis. I impulsively picked up the mobile phone to check the message. Thank you for yesterday. Let's spend another night together soon. The sender of the message was someone named Lily. I tried to remember, but I had no recollection of anyone named Lily. I checked towards the changing room. There was still no sign of Christopher coming up. Looking back at the mobile phone, it was carelessly left unlocked. I sighed. The more I looked, the more evidence of infidelity I found. The message exchanges alone confirmed the intimacy with Lily, but there were even pictures of them snuggling close together. Leaving such conclusive evidence without even locking the phone, how careless could one be? Or did he think it was okay to be found? I'm being underestimated. I became oddly calm. I recorded the mobile phone screen with my phone, heaping evidence of everything that might be relevant. After finishing, I placed the mobile phone back on the table, and Christopher came out of the bath. Without saying a word, and without any follow-up to earlier, Christopher retreated to his room. It was simple. Christopher was cheating. That's why he had been so distant. In my sorrow, I understood. From the next day, I started working towards divorcing Christopher. There was no more hesitation or confusion. All that was left was anger at being betrayed. First, I needed to find out who Lily was. Hiring a professional would be more reliable, so I decided to hire a detective. At the same time, I started my own investigation. Christopher's recent late work hours and weekend work seemed suspicious if he was cheating. I could quickly verify the facts with Dad's help. Though it pained me to worry him, there was no other choice. I needed to do what needed to be done. I'll show him hell. The hardest part during the divorce preparations was having to see Christopher's face even in such times. The face I once found dear now only brought up the desire to slap him. Maybe my disdain showed. You're looking uglier than usual. Are you sick or something? Christopher initiated a conversation. Couldn't he have found something nicer to say? I answered with a smile. I'm fine. Once the preparations were done, there would be no need to stay here any longer. Taking advantage of the weekend when Christopher went to work as usual, I decided to take action. I told everything to Dad, who was furious and immediately arranged a place for me to move. I had initially thought of returning to my parents' house, but my sister had just returned there for her childbirth. Considering the circumstances, staying at my parents' house was not an option. So, Dad arranged a mansion worth $1 million. It belonged to a relative who was about to put it up for sale. They weren't in a hurry to sell, so they let me stay there. Dad also gave me enough money for my immediate needs, so my life was back to normal. In fact, it became more comfortable. "Where the hell are you now?" The call from Christopher, full of surprise, came 3 days after I left the house. "Who knows?" So I replied, and Christopher's voice grew tense. "And the divorce papers are missing, don't tell me you." This surprised me too. He noticed the missing divorce papers quite quickly. Did he start searching frantically after realizing I was gone? This was the first time I've seen Christopher so flustered. Even through the phone, I could picture his panic, which made me laugh a little. "What about it?" "I've submitted them to the office." When I answered calmly, Christopher made a strange noise. "What? Why?" "You said, remember? If you can't make me happy, I should submit them. You even declared it with a smug face." "That was just to reassure Zoe's parents." So he was panicking because I actually submitted the divorce papers, which he intended only as a performance? "And I told you before. If this kind of life continues, I want a divorce." That time I was just tired. "I talked to Dad, and he said your department isn't that busy." I cut off Christopher's attempt to blame his fatigue. He always claimed to be busy, returning home late and frequently worked on weekends. I never doubted him, just worried. But I should have questioned it. Was Christopher really going to work, or should I have investigated? "I found it odd, you know? I asked Dad when I saw him yesterday. He was puzzled too. Overtime is one thing, but weekend work should only happen a few times a year, so he was also wondering why." "No, well... Hey, you weren't working, were you? What were you so busy with every week? Where were you going?" Christopher didn't respond. I knew it. He couldn't answer. In his mind, Christopher was probably scrambling for an excuse. He's smart and smooth-talking. But this time, nothing he said would matter. Because I already knew everything. Lily, right? She's quite the cutie. I could tell Christopher gasped over the phone. "How did you?" Detectives are quite efficient. They secured photos and videos as evidence right away. I looked over the photos and report in my hand, reading aloud. Lily. A 22-year-old office worker in the accounting department. Oh, more than a decade younger than you. I'm 8 years younger too. Christopher seems to like younger women. Lives in an apartment near the downtown area, 2nd floor. Wow, so you've been visiting her every week. Zoe, wait, Lily is... Christopher is quite the needy one. He used to cling to me a lot before we got married. Seeing Christopher, 8 years older, acting so needy made me happy back then, but now the mere thought disgusts me. By the way, conversations with Lily are also safely recorded as evidence. "Wait until I divorce my wife," what a classic line from a married man. Couldn't you come up with something better? The detective also suggested that Christopher looked down on me quite a bit. "Your wife will find out, you know." "It doesn't matter, she's on her way down anyway." That's what he said. I was utterly underestimated. "Wait, Zoe. You're misunderstanding something. Can we meet just once?" "I suppose. I was thinking we should meet one last time." The next night, we agreed to meet, with Lily accompanying him. The venue was the mansion I was renting. When Christopher arrived at the designated time, he seemed uneasy. "What's with this mansion?" "It's a place I'm renting. It's worth $1 million. $1 million? Christopher's voice cracked, and Dad watched him intently.
So, your dad is here too?
Christopher's eyes darted nervously. Well, yes. It's only fair since you brought Lily. Plus, this affair involves company employees. It's best to have Dad here, as he's the company's head. I suppose you're right, Christopher said with a forced smile. Dad glared at Christopher the entire time. Lily, with her bright hair and petite frame, looked cute, but had a surprisingly strong personality. As soon as the discussion began, glaring at me, and she opened her mouth. I'm a victim too. I had no idea Christopher was married. And now, I'm dragged here. It's unpleasant. Lily's assertiveness surprised me. But Christopher looked even more shocked. What? You were the one pushing me to leave my wife. That was just a joke. Christopher turned red with anger at Lily's evasion. Why did I even bother to have a relationship with such a woman? I could hear him mutter. Lily snapped back, and they started arguing right in front of us. To think I'd be serious about an old man like you. Excuse me? Who do you think caused all this? You said our company was doomed. That's why I decided to end it with Zoe. Wait, what? Apparently, right after we got married, Lily had whispered to Christopher. The company is on the verge of bankruptcy. As a husband, you'll end up suffering too. Initially, Christopher didn't take her seriously, but Lily was persuasive, and he began to believe her. Seeing me act considerately towards him, he concluded the company must indeed be in trouble. I thought you were sweet-talking me to saddle me with debts. What? I thought you were just tired. I found it odd that everyone was being overly kind to me. Perhaps his boss and co-workers were being cautious because he married the president's daughter. But the idea that Dad's company was in crisis was a complete misunderstanding. Dad, being present during this conversation, also confirmed. Thanks to everyone, we're actually thriving. There's absolutely no chance of going under anytime soon. At Dad's words, Christopher fell to his knees. I had a bad feeling, so what was all this for? Ultimately, Christopher was just caught in Lily's scheme. Lily was intrigued by Christopher, who had married the president's daughter, and approached him out of curiosity. Initially ignored, she lied to catch his attention. The company is finished. Being married to the president's daughter puts you at risk too. Apparently, this lie worked on Christopher. Fearing a joint downfall with us, Christopher probably started ignoring me, hoping for an amicable divorce. I was just deceived, Zoe, you understand, right? Christopher approached me with a strained face. Well, perhaps you were merely deceived. Yes, I was, so let's not talk about divorce. But you know, this has made things very clear to me. Christopher looked up at me, puzzled. Essentially, this man would be the first to flee if we were ever in the same predicament. And this time, he even cheated without consulting me about how business was going first. Moreover, instead of proposing divorce directly, he manipulated things so that it would seem like the suggestion came from me, which is the height of cowardice. You know the vows, in sickness and in health. You would probably abandon me without hesitation if I fell ill. No, I wouldn't do that, Zoe. Please listen. There's nothing left to discuss. I just wanted to know why you were ignoring me. All this time, I thought I had done something wrong. Let's handle the rest through our lawyers. Lawyers? Christopher's face went pale. Having an affair while married, did you think there wouldn't be any consequences? I'll make sure both you, Lily, and you, Christopher, are properly charged for the divorce proceedings. Wait. If I can't even stay at the company, how can I afford the shorty for a divorce trial? Christopher's voice trembled, and almost simultaneously, Lily also raised a panicked shout. No way, that's ridiculous. It was all just a joke, and it's his fault for falling for it. The two of them blamed each other, each insisting they were not at fault. The sight of that was so ugly, it made me sick. Had I endured a month of agony for these people? How pathetic. To the arguing pair, I said with a smile. Now I understand. You two are perfect for each other. So alike. I made the right decision stepping back. Well, we won't be seeing each other again. Goodbye.
Wait, Zoe!
Dad put his arm around my shoulder protectively. We left them behind. Christopher kept calling my name from behind, but I ignored him thoroughly. Later, I received the surety for the divorce proceedings from both Christopher and Lily. Christopher, apparently having a decent amount of savings, paid it in one lump sum. Lily's payment came from her parents, also in a lump sum. And as for their places at the company, we'll have to fire him. I tried to calm Dad, who was furious, while pondering what to do, but eventually, the two of them couldn't stand the scrutiny and resigned on their own. I was relieved, but Dad was the one who was most relieved and happy about it. Christopher seemed to have been crying till the end because he couldn't let go of the past. If only he hadn't done what he did. Perhaps what Christopher really regretted was losing the title of being the president's son-in-law. The thought of never having to see his face again felt refreshing. Returning home as a divorcee, my family welcomed me warmly. I also returned to my job as an office clerk. I thought I might be treated delicately, but to my surprise, everyone welcomed me back warmly. Since it's over, I was always wondering why someone like you chose him. Someone said so, patting my back, which made me burst into laughter. If I ever get married again, I'll make sure to avoid someone who's only good on the outside. Here, this is for you, Mom. Emma said so, but then in the next moment, she flipped the stew onto the floor.
What?
It was the first time my son, Michael's family had come over to our house. I was preparing dinner with Stella, my daughter-in-law, and Emma, my 3-year-old granddaughter. But then Emma, instead of placing the stew at Stella's seat, deliberately spilled it on the floor. It wasn't because she tripped or slipped. She clearly did it on purpose.
Wasting food like that. Why would you do something like this?
I couldn't help but scold Emma harshly. Because I thought it was easier for Mom to eat. Startled by being scolded, Emma said, crying and shaken.
Easier to eat?
I couldn't believe Emma's words and unconsciously repeated them. Mom always eats on the floor.
What do you mean?
Sobbing, Emma tried to explain. Hearing Emma's surreal words, I looked at Stella to question her. Seeing Stella with a pale face and her shoulders shrunken, I felt she was hiding something. Good morning. Today, as always, while looking at the portrait of my deceased husband, I greeted. I have been living alone since my husband Ian passed away a few years ago. The expression on Ian's face in the portrait is grumpy, with a deep furrow between his brows. Thinking back, I hardly ever saw him smile during his lifetime. Our marriage was arranged, and from the beginning, we were careful with each other. We barely spoke, each of us strictly keeping to our roles. A happy marriage seemed far from achievable, and we never went out together even on holidays. At that time, I didn't have friends to call my own, and of course, it was a time when there were no mobile phones, so I came to think that's just what marriage was. Ian would lock himself in his room or go out alone on weekends, coming back late at night. And sometimes we wouldn't even talk at home, always an icy atmosphere prevailing. Yet, my in-laws were persistent in wanting to see a grandchild. Suspecting illness due to the lack of childbirth news, they urged me to go to the hospital repeatedly. Ian, for his part, seemed annoyed being nagged, shared the bedroom with me just for one night. Luckily, I became pregnant and decided to pour all my love into raising the child. Ian showed no interest even as my belly grew, mercilessly assigning me household chores even when I was immobilized by morning sickness and wasn't even there for the birth of our child. When I was too exhausted and asked Ian for help, he dismissed me by saying he was busy. However, when our son Michael was born, Ian changed as if he were a different person and actively involved himself in parenting. For the first time, Ian suggested we go shopping together with Michael.
What kind of picture books should we read to Michael?
I couldn't hide my joy and spoke to Ian more than usual.
Wouldn't this outfit look nice on him?
Contrary to my excitement, Ian still had an angry look. He hardly responded and dismissed all my choices with a sigh and told me that he would decide everything. I wanted us to cooperate in parenting, but Ian rejected everything I tried to do or say.
Only a man can understand what a boy needs.
And eventually, even when feeding Michael, he said he wanted to focus on the meal, so he moved to a separate room. Ian was quite strict about everything from how to hold a fork and a knife and to the order of eating. It took 6 months before Ian approved of Michael's eating manners and allowed him to eat with me. The first time I saw Michael eat, I was astonished by how neatly he did it. He never complained or showed weakness, focusing solely on his studies and not playing with friends.
Michael, well done. Why don't you take a break sometimes?
I tried to comfort Michael with some cake as a snack while Ian was away.
Sweets aren't good for the body.
He refused without even glancing my way. As Michael entered high school, he joined the baseball team, wanting to train his spirit, and became a star pitcher of the team. Even after that, thanks to his disciplined effort, he tackled everything with all his might and graduated top of his class from a prestigious university known for its difficulty. Raised by the strict Ian, Michael grew up to be so graceful in his movements that people passing by on the streets would stop and stare. It seems he was even approached by several women for dates. I once saw Michael sighing to himself.
Michael, isn't there someone you're interested in? I find it more meaningful to spend my time honing myself, rather than romance.
His response to my casual question was marked by an even deeper sigh. Eventually, Michael made neither friends nor lovers, always a lone wolf, establishing himself as an object of admiration from afar. After university, he landed a job at a major publishing company, enviable to many. The publishing company kept him busy, and Michael lived a life of constant business trips, hardly ever returning home. He woke up early every morning and returned home on the last train. With such a lifestyle, he had no chance for encounters, dedicating his days to work alone. Even the formidable Ian would be asleep by the time Michael came home, so I secretly prepared snacks for him.
A man's body is his capital.
Ian had always fed Michael a perfect meal of one soup and one dish, and so he was forbidden snacks, especially midnight snacks. However, no matter how balanced the diet, it was clear that the hard-working Michael was gradually losing weight due to insufficient nutrition.
He's going to collapse if he keeps this up.
Michael initially refused the midnight snack, wanting to go to bed early. But one day, after exchanging such words several times, Michael's stomach growled loudly, cutting off his words.
"The stew is ready." I said, "I want to go to sleep." "See, the stomach doesn't lie,"
I gently told Michael, who turned bright red and looked down.
"Is it really okay for me to eat?" "Of course. I made it for that reason. Thank you."
With a slightly trembling voice, Michael carefully brought the spoon to his mouth. Then, with his spoon in his mouth, Michael froze.
"Michael, what's wrong?" "It's delicious."
It seemed the taste was shockingly good for Michael. He devoured the steaming stew, even asking for seconds. After finishing 3 plates, Michael showed a smile I had never seen before.
"Ah, this is the best feeling. I didn't know there was something this delicious. You've worked hard every day. I'll prepare a snack for you tomorrow night too."
From that day on, Michael began to eat the midnight snacks I prepared with curiosity. Thanks to that, Michael's weight returned to normal, unbeknownst to Ian. The time for midnight snacks, the only time Michael and I spent together, became the time I also looked forward to as well.
"Mom, what's for tonight's snack?" "Tonight, it's ramen." "Ramen? I've been wanting to try that."
For Michael, who had never eaten out, the midnight snacks I made were all first-time experiences. Every time, Michael would light up like a child and eagerly eat up the meal. And so, seeing Michael off to work in the morning as usual became part of my daily routine. Michael, having regained his health, made significant progress at work, becoming regarded as the star in the company. This led to a series of invitations from women, it seems. Seeing this, Ian, perhaps unable to stand it, recommended an arranged marriage, and quickly, the discussions concluded, and Michael ended up getting married without any prior dating experience. Michael married Stella, a woman who worked as a secretary to the president of a famous company. Though she was of a quiet demeanor, she appeared to be a polite, serious person.
I am inexperienced, so I ask for your kindness.
At our first meeting during the introduction, Stella greeted us politely, a rarity these days.
I will do my best to be a good wife and support Michael.
Stella smiled softly, narrowing her beautiful eyes, and I thought she looked as beautiful as a blossoming flower. We're going to be family, so don't hesitate to rely on us for anything. Happy as if I had gained a daughter, I exchanged contact information with Stella and told her so. Stella, coming from a family that lived a bit far away, nodded happily to my words. Thank you very much. It's very reassuring. Then, the newlyweds moved to the neighboring town. Anticipating they might have a lot of unfamiliar things to deal with in their new life, I decided to frequently send messages via mobile phone. However, when I asked if they needed any help, Stella, who was already domestic and skilled in household chores, seemed to have quickly won over Michael's heart. It appeared Michael often had to go on business trips due to work, but they seemed to get along well, going shopping together on holidays. Not only that, but Stella also took care of me by giving me candies when I had a sore throat or recommending a good plaster when I mentioned I had hurt my back, always considerate towards me. She would quickly reply to my messages, so I thought there was no need to worry. When I told Ian about Michael and Stella, he nodded as if to say, of course, making me completely at ease.
I'm happy to see them so happy.
Michael and Stella were blessed with a daughter named Emma in their 4th year of marriage, bringing me great joy. And I think even Ian softened a bit. However, life doesn't always continue happily. Before Emma turned 2, my Ian suddenly collapsed. Ian, who had lived a life rarely seen smiling, seemed to have been unknowingly harboring stress. By the time he was advised to be hospitalized, it was too late, and cancer had spread throughout his body. And so, Ian passed away, leaving us behind. After the funeral, as I started living alone, messages from Stella, which used to come frequently, gradually became scarce. Even when I offered to help with childcare, I was gently refused, not wanting me to go through the trouble. It started after Ian's funeral. Stella suddenly began acting strangely, and when I inquired about Emma or their life, her responses were curt, and sometimes there was no reply at all. She wouldn't answer phone calls, and I worried every day. Feeling the distance between Stella, Emma, and myself, time passed, and before I knew it, Emma was 3. Thinking at least for Emma's 3rd birthday, I decided to send a message about having a meal at my house.
Happy 3rd birthday to Emma. Have you gotten used to parenting?
Yes, thank you. It's been a while since we've seen each other. How about a meal at my place? No, thank you. Stella's cold reply made me sigh.
I haven't had much to look forward to since I became alone. I want to celebrate my first grandchild's 3rd birthday.
After sending such a message, perhaps my feelings got through, as she curtly replied, "All right, we'll go." I had doubts about Stella's sudden consent, but the joy of meeting Emma soon dispelled them. And finally, the day of the family meal arrived. "Stella, it's been a while." I greeted Stella and her somewhat tense family with a smile. "Sierra, it's been a while. Thank you for inviting us today." Wondering if they were nervous after such a long time, I let them into my house.
Come on, Emma, say hello to Grandma.
Emma, who had been shyly hiding behind Stella, came forward quietly when encouraged and bowed politely. "Grandma, hello." Contrary to Stella's uneasy and somber demeanor, Emma greeted me with a bright smile. "Emma, hello. I made stew today, let's eat together."
Yay! I love stew.
It was the first time I had seen Emma since she was just a baby. I was worried she might be shy, but Emma's cheerful and innocent demeanor lifted some of my anxiety. However, Stella, hunched over and unusually vigilant, was not the Stella I knew. She used to be considerate and attentive to her surroundings. While I was concerned about Stella, I decided to wait and see, understanding she might have things she didn't want to talk about.
Where's Michael?
Stella, looking unsettled, scanned the inside of the house.
Oh, Michael will be coming directly from his business trip, so he'll be late. I received a message. Stella, you didn't know? That's right. I'm sorry, I might have missed the message.
Stella seemed relieved for a moment and hastily checked her mobile phone as if to hide her expression. I'm sorry, I had a message too. I can't believe I missed it. I feel like a failure as a wife. Stella's blue face and the way she berated herself seemed excessive to me. The message had just come in, so there was no need to worry so much. However, I didn't press further in front of Emma.
It's not your fault, it's okay. Sit down, and I'll reheat the stew.
Sorry. Her voice was so low I had to ask again.
Stella, did you say something?
Nothing, it's nothing. Stella seemed even more withdrawn, making me feel she was hiding something from me. It was just a hunch, but these intuitions often prove correct.
I'll help you carry it.
Emma ran over with an innocent smile, cutting through the tense atmosphere.
Oh, thank you. But stay back from the stove, it's dangerous.
Emma's offer to help was impressively mature for a 3-year-old. Stella, meanwhile, sat down hesitantly and stared solemnly at her spoon.
Here you go, be careful, it's hot. Okay.
Emma energetically took her plate and slowly walked over to Stella. And then,
Here, this is for you, Mom.
Emma said, and in the next moment, did something unbelievable.
What?
Emma deliberately spilled the stew on the floor instead of placing it at Stella's seat. It wasn't because she tripped or slipped. She clearly did it on purpose.
Why would you do something like this? Wasting food.
I couldn't help but scold Emma harshly.
Because it's easier for Mom to eat.
Surprised by the scolding, Emma said, crying and shaken.
Easier to eat?
I couldn't believe Emma's words and repeated them unconsciously. Mom always eats on the floor.
Eating on the floor? What do you mean?
Mom always eats on the floor because Dad makes her. Emma tried to explain, sobbing. Hearing Emma's surreal words, I looked at Stella, who was trembling and pale.
Stella, what's going on?
Just as Stella was about to speak, the doorbell rang, and Michael appeared at the entrance. Despite the awkward timing, I quickly cleaned up the spilled stew and welcomed Michael in.
I'm home. Did something happen?
Michael seemed puzzled by the delay between the doorbell and the door opening.
Welcome back. I couldn't leave the stove.
I tried to act normally, hiding my agitation.
I see, is that stew I smell?
Yes, your favorite stew. I felt relieved I had made stew and breathed a sigh of relief. Unaware of anything, Michael cheerfully entered the living room, ignoring Stella's distress and sat down with a thud.
Nothing beats Mom's stew.
Michael spoke loudly while Stella bit her lip tightly. Feeling the tense atmosphere between them, I forced a smile, struggling to maintain a facade. I was skeptical about Michael making her eat on the floor, but I sensed their relationship wasn't good. The conversation remained superficial, the stew tasted bland, but somehow, the meal ended peacefully. After the Michael family left, I messaged Stella about the incident. The only reply I got was it's nothing. It can't be nothing. I murmured quietly to the mobile phone screen, reflecting on our interactions. Stella's messages have been cold lately. The distant replies didn't seem like they were coming from the caring Stella I knew. Thinking about the incident made me wonder if Michael was controlling her phone.
I can't overlook what just happened. I need to check on things myself.
With that thought, I decided to visit Michael's house. Even though it's spring, it was already dusk. I shivered in the cold air as I approached their house. Just then, I heard a loud argument.
It's your fault. What?
That was Michael's voice. Panicked, I pressed the doorbell. Michael, with a forced smile, greeted me.
Mom, we just said goodbye, what brings you back?
I need to talk to Stella.
What? Well, Stella's tired from the visit. I'll pass the message.
Michael blocked my way, visibly flustered.
This is an important matter between women.
My firm tone left Michael with no choice but to let me in.
Stella?
Looking around inside, I noticed the bathroom light was on.
I'm going in.
As I headed to the bathroom, Michael hurried after me, panicking.
Stella's in there. You can't go in now.
But I entered the bathroom before Michael could stop me. And what I saw was unexpected.
Stella!
Stella was in the shower, drenched, sitting on the floor. Sierra. I was cleaning the shower and accidentally turned it on myself. Stella weakly smiled as she spoke to me.
This is terrible. You'll catch a cold.
After finding a towel, I wrapped Stella in it, drying her hair and arms. I can't believe this. Sorry, Mom. Stella always messes up when I'm not watching. Michael didn't even attempt to get a towel, instead crossing his arms with an angry look. Stella was in a daze, quietly letting me help her. Seeing Stella's slight shivers, I couldn't deny Emma's words were true. Stella, I've dried you off somewhat, but you need to change immediately. Sierra, I'm sorry. Thank you. Always like this. Stella can't do anything without me. Michael complained, but Stella's fear was evident. Pretending to use the bathroom, I discreetly called the police, and soon the doorbell rang, signaling their arrival. Who's that? Michael answered reluctantly. We received complaints about loud noises from this house. The officer said, to which Michael lied about a misunderstanding. The officer insisted on speaking with us after checking the neighborhood. Today's a bad day. Scratching his head, Michael opened the door. 3 officers entered swiftly, one securing Stella and Emma while the others restrained Michael.
What?
Michael resisted desperately, but the officers were unfazed.
What the hell? What did I do?
He knew he couldn't fight off the police, but he still tried to make himself loose. To that the police said in a low voice,
If you don't calm down, you're obstructing the execution of our duties.
Michael turned pale and suddenly became quiet. Meanwhile, Stella, overwhelmed by the sudden events, saw the subdued Michael and burst into tears. Looking at me and the officers, she spoke quietly. I can't take it anymore. Stella revealed her pent-up frustrations. As soon as we got married, he submitted my resignation without my consent. I protested to the CEO, but no one believed me. Rumors had spread that Stella complained about her low salary and was unhappy with the CEO, none of which were true. Ultimately, her resignation was accepted despite her objections. Life became hell after I became a housewife. First, her mobile phone was taken away. In her unfamiliar married life, it seems Stella had many things she wanted to discuss with me or her parents, but Michael wouldn't listen. Especially about meals. Whatever I cooked was always criticized as bad. I wanted to ask Sierra for recipes, but was told to figure it out on my own. At first, it was just verbal criticisms, so Stella thought she could bear it. Things got worse when Emma was born. He did help with childcare, but... Michael appeared to be a kind and good father to Emma, but his verbal abuse towards Stella in her presence increased. After Ian passed, the harassment intensified. Verbal abuse became a routine. Stella was ordered to eat meals on the floor and endured days of being overworked by Michael. When they went shopping, she was only allowed to buy what Michael specified, limiting her outings to the bare essentials. Any slight dissatisfaction from Michael, like a lightly cleaned area or a wrinkled shirt, resulted in Stella being doused with cold shower. Using water as a means of harassment left no physical marks. I had no one to turn to. It was so hard. Tears fell again from Stella's eyes. She confirmed my suspicions of her suffering under Michael's harassment. You've been enduring all alone. It must have been so hard. I regretted not noticing the signs earlier. As I comforted Stella, I reflected on my actions. Michael faced interrogation after everything was revealed. During the interrogation, Michael sat arrogantly, denying any wrongdoing. An officer, unable to overlook Michael's behavior, pressed him hard. Why Stella acted fearfully around Michael, and the reason Emma naturally spilled the stew on the floor were questioned. Even without visible marks, harassment traces could be investigated with modern medical technology, the officer sternly stated. Finally cornered, Michael confessed. "I've been under a lot of stress," Michael murmured as if speaking to himself. He resented the strict discipline enforced by his father since childhood. He was strictly told about the order of the meal he ate and the right size he was supposed to eat in one bite.
"You can't even do this."
Harsh scoldings for minor mistakes were part of his upbringing. Forced to learn kanji and English at a young age, Michael was made to revise tirelessly for any mistakes. In elementary school, while peers enjoyed games, Michael was sent to unwanted lessons and cram schools. He revealed his dissatisfaction with all of it. In high school, he was forced into a strict baseball team, despite having no interest. "The first time I played soccer during a break, I found it incredibly fun, but my father never allowed me to switch to the soccer team." I was shocked by Michael's words. I trusted Ian to take care of meals in another room, never questioning it, and rejoiced at Michael's academic and extracurricular diligence. "All the times you were working so hard, it wasn't because you enjoyed those activities." I didn't know Michael loved soccer, and I was unaware of his interactions with Ian. I was just preparing lunches every day without knowing anything about my family. "I had no idea you felt that way, Michael. It's natural for you not to know. He said it was a man's promise and made me keep quiet." Michael, adeptly trained mentally, easily maintained composure without my knowledge. He didn't enjoy studying either. He was restricted from popular student activities like gaming and fashion interests. And even his love for sweets was limited. Ultimately, an arranged marriage decided by Ian added to his growing resentment. Having the marriage arranged without his consent, Michael seemed to have started feeling indifferent about everything. Even after getting married and moving away, the pressure of being married to someone chosen by Dad made him feel monitored, and the curse lifted only after Dad's death. "I became obsessed with the idea that Stella should strive just like me." That was how Michael concluded. I thought I had raised Michael together with Ian. I had no inkling Michael was enduring such hardship behind my back. The guilt and powerlessness overwhelmed me. Despite Michael and Ian keeping silent, I bear responsibility for not noticing. "Stella, this isn't something an apology can fix, but it was my fault for raising him poorly. I'm truly sorry." "No. I'm the one who should apologize for not being able to heal Michael's heart." Stella's words, ever so kind, made tears spill from my eyes. "Stella, you've done nothing wrong. I'm truly sorry for everything." Afterward, Michael was arrested for assault. Having shared his burdens, he seemed somewhat relieved. He will now have time to reflect and make amends. Stella decided to divorce Michael, taking Emma back to her parents' home. "Sierra, thank you for everything. I haven't done anything worthy of your thanks." I decided to support Stella and Emma financially in Michael's stead. Initially hesitant, Stella accepted after I expressed a desire to maintain a good relationship. "I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable. I'll always consider you as my family. Thank you. Having a relationship with you and Emma is a great comfort to me." Stella, having settled into her new life, seemed to regain her bright smile. I regularly received photos of Stella and Emma. She also invites me several times a year to visit Emma. "Sierra, would you like to come over sometime? Emma misses you." Seasons have cycled through peaceful days since the incident. Emma started going to elementary school and even visited my house alone.
"Exactly, Emma, you're doing great."
I was teaching Emma how to make hamburgers during one of her visits.
"Grandma, this is fun."
Emma showed a carefree smile, shaping the hamburgers perfectly. "Indeed, it's fun. It'd be nice if Mom could join us next time."
Yeah. I'll make a lot.
I deeply cherished these moments of happiness. Relieved that Michael hadn't inflicted lasting wounds on Emma, I wished for her to always be smiling. As we placed her small hamburgers in the pan, her eyes sparkled with anticipation for the completion of the meal.
May your life be filled with smiles from now on,
I whispered, as if making a vow. My name is Monica. Whenever I see a beautiful woman of my age, I think to myself, I've got to work on my skincare, or maybe lose some weight. But, before I know it, I'm saying I'll start tomorrow every day, and now I'm 42. Lately, even using a toner feels like a chore, so my skin is protected by a natural oil veil of my own making.
Hey Siri!
Tell me how to fix my lazy nature and become like Anne Hathaway by just sleeping. Today, I want to share a story from back when I was still all about self-improvement. Please listen. It happened about 15 years ago. I had been married to my husband Andy for 2 years, but we were still very much in honeymoon mode. That's because Andy had to go on a business trip alone just 6 months into our marriage. He was selected as a temporary replacement because the person originally meant to go fell ill. I wanted to scream, "Don't disrupt our newlywed life." But being a junior employee, he couldn't disobey his superiors. I wanted to go with him, but we had just married and still had our condo lease. Breaking the lease for a short assignment and then having to find a new place seemed too much. After discussing it, we decided it would be more trouble to go together for such a short time. We can manage being apart. So, just 6 months into our marriage, we ended up living separately. Finally, after about half a year, Andy's solo trip ended, and we could live together again.
Finally, we can spend time together.
I was filled with the desire to enjoy our newlywed life. But it didn't quite go as planned. Originally, when Andy had to go on his business trip, my mother-in-law, Violet, got angry.
Choosing to separate so early in your marriage, does Monica's love for Andy even exist?
She started visiting our house frequently to check up on us. Let me make it clear, our separation right after the wedding was a mutual decision. We talked on the phone every night and met every 2 weeks. Our love hadn't faded just because we were newlyweds living apart. But Violet believed that a wife should always follow her husband. She thought a wife's fulfillment came from being by her husband's side and taking meticulous care of him. She had a bit of an old-fashioned view. It seemed more like Violet wanted to do these things rather than being asked by her husband. To me, she looked like a self-satisfied, overbearing wife. Because of this, during Andy's business trip,
Monica is probably cheating on Andy by not going with him.
Violet had such misunderstandings. Andy tried hard to clear up these misunderstandings, so our relationship on the surface was fine. But Violet seemed to have grown to dislike me for letting her son go on his own. Given this background, Violet frequently came to our house for what she called daughter-in-law's work check. In short, it was to see if I was properly managing the household and treating Andy right. I wasn't doing anything wrong, so she could look all she wanted. If that would earn her trust, then so be it. First, she would come over unannounced and immediately start inspecting the bathroom and shower, looking for any dirt. A single hair or eyelash out of place meant I failed. She would yell at me if there was even a slight water stain on the shower mirror.
How can it be spotless every day when it's used daily?
I wanted to shout, I work too, you know? But I had to endure. Then the fridge was checked. If it didn't have Andy's favorite foods, she'd get mad. Once, fearing Violet's surprise checks, I kept donuts, Andy's favorite, in stock daily. Andy was happy eating them, but he ended up gaining weight, resembling a donut himself.
That couldn't be good. If I did everything Violet said, Andy might end up with lifestyle diseases.
Realizing the danger, I stopped keeping sweets in the house. Hang in there, Andy, until you lose some weight. But when Violet noticed the donuts were gone, she labeled me as cruel for not letting a tired Andy eat his favorite foods. I understood why Andy said he lost weight when he lived alone. Only I could extend Andy's life. Furthermore, if Violet found leftovers from last night's dinner in the fridge, she got angry.
If you can't even manage portion sizes, that's just basic.
But we're a newlywed couple and not that wealthy. Andy and I, both working, talked it over.
Let's cook meals in bulk to save on household chores.
And Andy finally suggested that. With his unpredictable working hours, Andy could hardly participate in housework. I believed it was fine for whoever could do it to handle it, so I didn't mind. I was more worried about Andy overexerting himself and getting sick. But Andy proposed this idea.
I don't want all the burden to fall on Monica.
He said so. We explained all this to Violet, and when Andy spoke, she stayed silent. But when it was just the two of us, she started saying all sorts of things as if her emotions were exploding. Andy told me I could ignore Violet's words, and even said I didn't have to let her into our house. But I couldn't do that. Whenever Violet came over, she was always waiting at the entrance when I returned from my part-time job. Additionally, she seemed to have become friendly with the neighbors her age, so when I saw them chatting and smiling. Look, she's back. Ah, Monica, I was waiting for you. I just couldn't choose not to let Violet in. Moreover, Violet told the neighbors, I'm helping because my son's wife can't do any housework. So, from the outside world, our household looked like a kind mother-in-law and a clueless, incompetent daughter-in-law of the modern times. Violet seemed pleased with the situation. You're lucky to have a good mother-in-law like me to teach you things. Every time she pointed something out, she said that.
Sorry, I don't think so at all. I'm a modern woman, I don't understand these things.
I'd like to tell her that, but then I'd just be playing into Violet's hands. It would only add to the useless daughter-in-law stories she shared with the neighbors. But my patience was reaching its limit.
I know you're newlyweds and new at a lot of things, but you're going to have to learn all this stuff so you don't get in trouble with Violet.
A neighbor said to me, and I felt last night's curry boiling up in my stomach. The neighbors didn't know what went on inside our house, and I hadn't corrected Violet's narrative, so it was understandable. The truth was it wasn't my fault, but Violet's rules were too overbearing. I was working and managing the housework, and more importantly, if Andy was satisfied, that should be enough. After all, this house was mine and Andy's house. But as a newlywed, I couldn't speak out. I would say it now, being stronger. But back then, I was young and wanted to maintain a good relationship with my mother-in-law. I thought enduring it was the right thing to do. I didn't openly refute Violet's words to the neighbors for the same reason. If I did it, I would have been labeled as a defiant young person. That was probably my mistake. Violet's behavior gradually escalated. She started staying for dinner and then overnight. This made it impossible for Andy and me to, well, never mind. Let's save that for a late-night adult channel talk. Haha. Well, for a newlywed couple, having her stay over was truly a nuisance. Even Andy complained that.
Even though she's my family, I can't relax with my mom around. That's strange.
He was subtly supporting me and trying to prevent friction between me and Violet, so he must be stressed too. I felt sorry for Andy, coming home tired. A few times, Andy said to Violet,
Dad will get lonely, go home.
But she said,
It's okay, James told me to look after things. I'm representing him.
She used the authority of Andy's father, James, to her advantage. Andy's family is an old-fashioned type that believed in the wives should obey their husband's principle. Even at this time of being married, Andy still had some irrefutable disagreements with James. The ingrained senses could be frightening, but for me, getting scolded by my dad always hurt more than by my mom. In short, my father was like the last line of defense. My mother got angry sometimes, but angering my father felt like the end of the world. He was like a mental pillar. That was why I thought I understand Andy's feelings. And since Violet started eating dinner at our house, I had been messing up dinner more often. The breakfasts I made when Violet wasn't around had never failed since we got married. At first, I thought I had messed up, and I think Andy did too. I apologized to Andy.
Sorry, looks like I messed up.
But Andy replied,
It's rare for you. Aren't you tired? Take a rest today.
But only Violet exaggeratedly complained. "Wow, this is so salty, it'll shoot up my blood pressure." I thought it was salty too, and the taste could raise blood pressure, so I honestly apologized. But soon I started to wonder, was I failing so often? Even when the taste seemed fine during cooking, it would be too sweet or too salty at dinner. I even got checked at the hospital, but there was nothing wrong with me. Could it be? I thought, and on a whim, I made dinner on the day Violet visited and left the kitchen. And that happened just as I suspected. Violet was humming and heavily sprinkling salt into the pot. The strength in her right hand and shoulder, holding the salt, was like she was avenging her parents. She could have surpassed a professional baseball player with that. Humming nonchalantly, she was ruining my cooking. I thought I had to tell Andy. But that night, Andy was extremely tired. He had been doing overtime every day for over 3 weeks, and the project deadline was looming. Plus, our wedding anniversary was the following week, and he was trying to get time off for it. We spent our first anniversary apart, so Andy had suggested a date for this year. Inside, my feeling was torn among wanting him to rest, looking forward to the date, and trying not to burden Andy. That was my recent state. I would talk to him about Violet after the anniversary. While I was thinking this, an incident happened. Of all nights, it was our wedding anniversary. True to his word, Andy took the day off and took me on a date. He wanted my homemade dinner, so when we got back home after the date,
There she was. At the front door, that person was. "It's your wedding anniversary today, right? I made dinner,"
Violet said, showing Tupperware from her bag. As I thought, uh-oh. And looked at Andy, he looked the most resigned. But we couldn't be so cruel as to send away someone who brought food. Andy seemed to be resigned to it too. "Eat and then go home today." He said that and opened the front door. I was so looking forward to coming home with Andy and having dinner. Now the entrance looked like the gates of hell.
"God, please protect us."
Violet entered the living room, happily opened the Tupperware, and ordered me to get the dishes. Wanting her to leave quickly, I moved promptly and obediently. Andy seemed to feel the same and helped, but Violet said,
"You sit down. You're the star today."
And she moved the chair at the table to make Andy sit.
"Wait, what day is this? Isn't the wedding anniversary about the couple? Why is an outsider taking charge?"
But I stayed quiet. Of course, it was to send her home quickly. We should work emotionlessly like a robot, eat dinner, and send Violet home. That was the mission for us as a couple. Let's do this. What Violet prepared was Andy's favorite meatloaf and sides. Seeing this, I again thought, oh. Noticing my face, Andy asked me, "What's wrong?" "Well, I doubled up. You like meat dishes, so I was preparing a steak with premium meat." I honestly told that. Then Violet exclaimed,
"Oh, premium meat. Great. Cook it quickly."
Of course, I hadn't prepared a portion for Violet, but she seemed eager to eat. However, saying no, wait, would just extend the time with Violet in a lecture. I'd rather avoid that at all costs. I should have kept quiet. Despair filled my heart as I reluctantly began preparing the steak. "Here you go," I said as I placed the cooked meat on the table. I had other side dishes in mind, but for today, this would be enough. So, I gave my steak to Violet and thought I'd just eat her brought meatloaf and sides.
"Thank you. This is special for you, Monica. I made it just for you, always working so hard."
With a big smile, Violet pulled out a large Tupperware from her bag. Looking inside, at first glance, it seemed like a meatloaf drenched in gravy sauce, but on closer inspection, something was off. It was strangely red and shiny.
"Wait. Raw meat? What is this, so mysterious and unknown? Why mine was different from Andy's tomato sauce version?"
Let me remind you, Violet had a history of turning my cooking into a high blood pressure menu.
Would such a person cook for a wedding anniversary?
I peered at the offered meatloaf for a moment, managing to thank her while buying time. Upon closer inspection, this is. Andy also peeked into the Tupperware and then at my face. It was amazing how couples could communicate just with a glance.
Andy, go ahead and eat. Yeah, yours looks like better meat, I'll take it. Thanks. What?
Violet's eyes widened at our exchange. Andy didn't hesitate to transfer the meatloaf from the Tupperware to his plate.
You don't have to do anything.
Normally, Violet would say like that, but now, she was just pale and silent as I thought.
Well, everything's ready, let's eat. No, no!
Violet snatched the meatloaf from Andy's hand with a near scream. The moment it fell and hit the floor, there was a thud, an unusual sound for a meatloaf.
This meatloaf makes quite a noise, doesn't it?
Indeed. Did you overcook it, Violet? I asked with a sarcastic smile, while Andy just stared at Violet. She remained silent, eyes downcast at the meatloaf. Hey, Violet. Why is it okay for me to eat it, but not Andy? Come on, tell me. Hey, hey. I annoyingly hovered around the stunned Violet. My patience, already thin from her ruining our anniversary, had reached its limit. The thrill of retaliation was unexpectedly exhilarating.
Andy doesn't like tomato sauce. I wanted to make something he likes for the anniversary.
Eh? I like any meat, really. It's a waste, maybe it's still good, I'll eat this.
No, you shouldn't eat something that's fallen.
Violet panicked as Andy casually picked up the meatloaf, talking nonchalantly. Is it wrong for me to eat what I like? Right. It's a shame not to eat it though he says he will eat it. Oh, Violet, you can eat it, it's okay. A little bit won't hurt. Andy's smirk was barely containable, understanding everything from the sound meatloaf was dropped. I almost laughed, but managed to restrain myself. Maybe it's too big for you to eat? We have steaks. Should I cut it smaller, wait here?
Eh?
Oh, I'll cut it then. Right, do that. As Violet flustered, Andy brought the cutting board and knife. Here goes. Let's it cut, but as expected, the meatloaf couldn't be cut.
Oh my, this meatloaf is quite hard, isn't it?
Maybe the gravy sauce is slimy? Maybe it'll work if it's washed.
Great idea.
This was a turning point for Violet, but I headed to the sink with the meatloaf.
Wait. Stop. Please, Monica. I'll remake it. Remake it? How was she planning to do that? Could she really think we hadn't noticed?
Both Andy and I had realized it from the moment it was in the Tupperware. Ignoring Violet's attempt to stop us, washing off the gravy sauce revealed a food sample meatloaf. This is clearly not meat, even without tasting it. Violet, do you make meatloaf out of wax? A family recipe? A secret ingredient? It's a bit too conspicuous, though. I waved the food sample meatloaf next to my face, taunting Violet. So I grew up on wax, huh? You're a wax figure.
Stop it, that's creepy. Kidding.
I know. Violet glared at us with a hateful look as we joked around. Violet, I understand you dislike me, but aren't you embarrassed by such an obviously childish setup?
Shut up! It's your fault for not divorcing despite my coming over every day.
So, I had no idea that she was hoping for a divorce. After all, both Andy and I, though annoyed by Violet, still loved each other. We never even considered divorce, so we didn't raid into Violet's intentions. We only thought about how to get her to leave quickly or how she was a nuisance. Now that I think about it, Violet's method to push for a divorce was incredibly inefficient. You could have just said so. I should have been clear too, like, Violet, you're annoying, stop adding salt to my cooking.
Eh?
Both Violet and Andy were surprised by this. The dinners were oddly sweet or salty, so I spied on Violet after cooking. And there she was, shaking salt like she was vanquishing something. Do you want to shorten your life that much? Violet turned bright red. She seemingly didn't expect that I had noticed. Sing that song again, please. You were humming, right? It was good. Violet glared at me with teary eyes as I egged her on. Humming or talking to oneself is most embarrassing when you know someone heard. Humming while ruining Monica's cooking. Andy glared at Violet.
I can't believe it,
I said, and then.
Why would you go that far?
Andy held his head.
Mom, even if you do such things, I won't divorce. What's the point? You want me to suffer through a divorce I don't want?
Violet looked at him in surprise by a pure question from Andy. No.
It's undeniable, right? It's only because Monica is patient. Otherwise, I might have been divorced.
It was a fair point. In that sense, I should be known as the patient daughter-in-law who endures Violet's unreasonable demands in the neighborhood.
Enough. It's an important day, so please leave. Here, take your wax meatloaf as a souvenir. Wait, Andy.
Violet clutched Andy's arm, trying to persuade him.
Enough. I was really looking forward to today. I finally got a day off. I don't even have the energy to be angry anymore. You've been a nuisance every day, and now you ruined the day I worked so hard for. It's too much. Get out.
Andy skillfully twisted his hand free from Violet's grip and pushed her out the front door. Violet wailed outside, but I no longer feared the neighbors' opinions. There was no turning back now. Andy seemed to feel the same, declaring a redo of our anniversary. He eagerly asked for my cooking. I laughed and replied,
Sure.
Violet's crying didn't bother us. Afterwards, due to complaints from the neighbors about the noise, Andy contacted James, who came to pick up Violet. Surprisingly, upon seeing Violet, James slapped her cheek. I heard that James had always reprimanded Violet, saying she shouldn't visit us too often, that a couple needs their own time to be truly a couple. But she didn't listen, insisting we were happy with her visits. James kept quiet, thinking we were enjoying it, unaware of the trouble we were experiencing. After apologizing to us, James also explained the situation to the neighbors on our behalf. Thanks to that, word spread through the condo, and I was able to shed the reputation of being the clueless and incompetent daughter-in-law. I was grateful for James' intervention. My own words wouldn't have had the same effect.
Thank you, James.
And now, after being scolded by James, Violet stopped imposing on our home. But she harassed me whenever we went back home, thinking nobody was watching. However, James, suspecting something like this, caught her red-handed and averted any issues. Well, not for Violet.
If you keep trying to make Andy and Monica divorce, you can't stay in this house.
James said so and Violet was told to divorce. Thanks to that, we found peace, but I worried about elderly James living alone. So we decided to live with him. Initially, it was out of gratitude, but it turned out to be quite wonderful. He would pick up our son from kindergarten without being asked. And he cooked French cuisine, drawing on his experience as a former restaurant staff. It's embarrassing how well he takes care of us when we should be the ones helping him. Once again, thank you, James. For him, living in a lively home with small children at his age was something he never expected, and he's grateful for it. He's too good of a person, truly a father to be respected. It makes sense why Andy couldn't argue with him, and why his words were absolute in his home. He's always right. No wonder he's absolutely truthful. Even at our home, we obediently listen to what he says. Honestly, it's not like winning the lottery or a grand business success, not the happily ever after you hear in fairy tales. But with not only James, but 2 sons and a daughter, our days are lively, just as James said they would be. Even as a wife who doesn't bother with skincare and is getting older, I have a kind, loving husband who still takes me on dates for our anniversary every year. Oh, I do my share of housework and parenting. Just tend to put myself last, hee. Despite everything, I've come to appreciate the ordinary. It's been 15 years since we were married. We still have the freshness of newlyweds, combined with the comfort and laxness that comes with familiarity, feeling happiness in everyday life. For our next anniversary date, I should work on skincare and getting in shape. I think I said that last year too.